Michigan Liberation is a statewide network of people and organizations organizing to end the criminalization of Black families and communities of color in Michigan. We envision a state without mass incarceration, mass policing, and punishment. We envision a state with the best public education in the nation, single-payer health care, and thriving Black and brown communities. Here on the Respect the Roots podcast, we will lift up the stories and experiences of those impacted by mass incarceration, collective ties to the criminal legal system, and the frontline efforts to end mass incarceration.
Hey everybody, it's Miss Marjon. Welcome to another episode of What? Respect the Roots. Today I've got none other than Kat. Yes, what's up, Kat? Kat is a community organizer and also the chair of the Human Relations Commission. What's going on, Kat? And also we're going to talk about reframing oppressive systems as fluid and transformable.
Yes.
Yes, that's a mouthful, but I know you got, hey, we about to dig right into it, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm here, and I'm very grateful to be here to talk about this in a little bit more depth.
Wow. Now, you know, before we get started, the chair of the Human Relations Commission, what is that? What is that exactly? Got to dig into that. We know about organizing, you know, community organizers, but what exactly is that position, Kat?
Yeah, so the Human Relations Commission is actually an advisory board to the city of Ypsilanti that's in the city charter.
Okay.
And so the purpose and goals of the Human Relations Commission is to eliminate discrimination in the city, and by paying attention to the different policies that perpetuate it and different practices that support it. And so the Human Relations is consisted of 9 voting members, to be able to do these different responsibilities to fulfill that purpose.
Wow, that's what's up. Wow. So, Kat, we're going to dig right into this. You know, when you filled out the form to come onto the podcast, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love having our partners, our base members come in and everything and talk with us on the podcast, because this is where it really goes down. One of the subtopics that I brought to the table, and he was like, yeah, I like that, is leveraging personal experience and professional expertise for systematic change. So I first want to get involved or talk to you about harm reduction.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And also, I really appreciate the accessibility of like having people express interest in being able to come on the podcast, because I think that's an opportunity to really tap into different experiences and skill sets without really centering the typical people that you see on podcasts or keynote speakers, what have you. And it's a good way to kind of like view all the different people doing community work and respecting the roots in a way. So I appreciate that. Yes, leveraging personal and professional experiences to create progressive, meaningful change in the community. So for me, my father was formerly incarcerated before I was born, and when he was alive, when I was alive, he was in and out of county jail for an alcohol use disorder that was constantly met with stays at the county jail or different conviction histories. And so we witnessed that as a family, the hardships that like incarceration as a method to treat, if you will, substance use disorders doesn't work. And in a way that aligns a lot with one of Michigan Liberation's campaigns, Care Not Criminalization.
Yes.
And so I didn't really quite understand what any of that really meant growing up. I grew up in a very small town in Texas. It was very segregated, a lot of history there that there was never a lot of language afforded to me to be able to really understand. But I remember feeling a big, deep sorrow in my chest of just like witnessing what I was seeing, but not being able to have the language afforded to me by my public school education to really understand what was happening. And so when I went in to get my master's degree in social work, I had the privilege of like hearing an individual who spent 50 years in prison as he was charged as a juvenile with life in prison without parole. And at 17 years old, he made a life-changing decision, and he ended up taking the life of another human being. But when he was sharing his experience, I remember listening to every single point an intervention could have been made for this person who was went to prison before this civil rights movement and came out after all of this change has been made, to see a completely different world. And it really touched me, especially being in the social work program, trying to think of like the failed systems, the failed programs and practices and policies that like ultimately led this person to take another person's life and the history that exists beyond that. Which got me invested into doing that type of work professionally, which is when I spent a few years doing criminal defense social work, which was one of my favorite jobs, to be honest. And we actually worked and partnered with Michigan Liberation a few times to help bail people out who I worked with. But in that role, again, I was kind of in the same experience where a lot of my clients were poor, people of color, people with like disabilities, mental health issues, substance use disorders, extensive trauma histories, housing instability at all parts or existing in their life at the same time, or some only isolated. But there was still, in every single part, a system that was not working and broken, but strategically designed to do exactly what it was doing.
Right.
And so after working in direct service experience for like 10 years and kind of observing a lot of these gaps in services and policies where there's not really a lot of comprehensive understanding from a macro level what's really happening on a micro level. And so very well-intended policies can actually have adverse impacts. And so witnessing those gaps, I decided to jump into policy because I felt like I was ready to be able to take that experience and really put that on a more systemic level.
Wow. So reframing oppressive systems. Wow. That was deep, Kat. And, you know, I can't say it enough. We always say those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So that's cool that you tied in your upbringing to now the work that you're doing. So it makes sense. And, you know, if you're just joining us, I'm talking to Kat, who is a community organizer and also the chair of Human Relations Commission in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and so forth. So just for some of those who are not familiar, I hate to put you on the spot, Kat, what is harm reduction? Can you give us just a really soft definition?
Oh, man. I hope I don't blow this.
No, you gotta do it.
Very hard to define that softly. It's for me, I think about harm reduction as it relates to policy as being reducing the risk. And so while I'm an abolitionist and I believe in the abolishment of systems that are designed to oppress and harm people, I also recognize that that is not an overnight thing and that there needs to be harm reduction approaches to achieving that goal, like designing and dreaming and building systems that are rooted in healing and joy and love and meeting people where they're at. And ultimately, that's what I think harm reduction is recognizing that we're all on different playing fields. We're all coming from different starting points. We're complex people. We have many things that kind of create us who we are now. And so when we meet people where they're at, and whether that's through abstinence-only programming or it's, safe use kits to help make sure people are using safely and not spreading diseases or contracting them themselves, those things are all kind of rooted in harm reduction for me.
Kudos. You did. Hey, you explained it good to me. So I think, and you did it in a layman's term, where anybody can understand. So
digestible.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, Kat, I want to go into the next section because we're almost halfway through. Intersectionality and professional expertise, okay? And kind of touching about the mental health and criminal legal system, all right? And if you could also share like a personal experience that that deals with the criminal legal system. I know you talked about your father and so forth, but even as it pertains to your work, your professional work and so forth. So how can you expand on that one?
Like, how can I expand on the importance of viewing systems as like dynamic rather than static with this professional or lived experience I have?
Right. And the intersection of mental health and the criminal justice
Yes. So
systems.
a lot of people don't know this, but the 3 largest mental health facilities in the United States are all correctional facilities. They're jails.
Wait, say that again.
The 3
I'm about
largest
to put the spotlight on you. Say that
the
again.
3 largest mental health facilities, de facto at least, in the United States are Cook County Jail, LA County, and Rikers Island, which to me, it says a lot that we are criminalizing mental health. We are criminalizing poverty. We're criminalizing homelessness. And those are things that are perpetuated by policies. And also not really thinking through a transformational process. For example, this is a really great example of like, why do we have so many people who are mentally ill incarcerated? And that starts with like the deinstitutionalization process of the state hospitals in the 50s. And that when they decided to remove people from state hospitals and into the community for care, they didn't think through or invest in that system in the community. And therefore, many people who were released were then unhoused. And so we had a lot of people who were mentally ill on the streets not being able to receive care because that wasn't really built up before one was dismantled. And that's kind of an example of like how it's really important to think through creatively of like what the needs of the community and the individual are when you're thinking through like removing and transforming systems. Because that's a perfect example of how one was not invested in or even really structured sustainably. And now we have this very big example of people leaving state hospitals and entering prisons at high rates. And so there's a really big intersection there, obviously. And so for me, I was a mental health professional at a county jail after I did criminal defense social work. And so a lot of people who I saw were consumers of the community mental health program in that county. And being able to ensure that people are getting their medications on time, that people are getting access to their medications. I also saw a lot of people who were told they had a diagnosis, but they didn't have any idea what that really meant. And I felt like that was so pathologizing to just tell someone that, you know, you're schizophrenic, but then they're left wondering, like, what does that exactly mean? And so, like, I would ask, would you like me to print off, you know, some, like, information sheets on what this means and, like, what your options are? And it was, like I was going above and beyond in a way, which is still absurd to me. But as a clinician, that's really absurd to me. So those things are very much intersecting, along with many other identities as well.
Right. And I'm just going to take a guess. A while I'm totally off my notes here, Kat. I'm assuming there's, you know, it used to be a time, I know I'm not going to tell my age, where they did have mental hospitals or institutions. Now it seems like they've gotten rid of them. There's more prisons.
Right. And the solution isn't...
It's like, where do they go?
Right. And that's the thing, like...
streets?
Right. And that's where a lot of quality of life laws started becoming popular, which are the laws that call loitering or soliciting misdemeanors or crimes against public morals, for example.
Right.
But, I mean, the solution isn't institutionalizing people, period. That's never a really good solution. The solution is investing in communities, and a lot of that is safer communities. That's how they start, is by investing in them. And a lot of the systems that we are operating in, the reasons why they're so powerful and strong is because there's policies that support them. And then those people who we elect support those policies and enact those policies. So local elections really do matter as it relates to that, especially. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
No, you did a great job. And I'm glad you touched on that, how local elections matter. And even, you know, at Michigan Liberation, you know, we're in our care, not criminalization, just trying to even giving alternatives besides calling the police.
Right. Yeah.
That is a whole nother kind of campaign or monster that is ongoing. Because
Yes.
think about it, when a person is having an episode, who do you think? I mean, that's the first thing,
That's
911.
I mean that's the thing when you're a little kid, what they tell you to do from starting as a young child in schools is like when there's an emergency, you call 911. And so that's almost indoctrinated in us starting from a young age that these people on the other end of 911 are supposed to help us when we're feeling unsafe.
Right.
But that is obviously not, I mean, data shows that is not the case for a lot of people, especially if you're Black, and especially if you're Black and mentally ill. So those things are a recipe for state violence, inevitably. And those are the reasons for that is that there's policies and practices that support that behavior, and support those violences to continue to be perpetuated. And so the local elections matter. I mean, it's even interesting, like in the county I live in, I ran a campaign, a grassroots campaign, not with the intentions of winning the primary race, but with the intentions of making the Democrat candidate platform go more left for that race.
Right. And that's what I want to talk about, like, before, because we got about 10 minutes or so, community leadership and advocacy.
Right.
Because I want to talk about what strategies you found effective in this grassroots campaign that you just mentioned. So I'm glad you leading into the next point.
Honestly, I was going to say, like, the strategies was really listening to the community and what the community was needing and amplifying that on a platform that was like, how often do you get asked to participate in candidate forums or podcasts or different things? Like, that is a platform that I had the privilege to leverage these experiences that were so often being neglected to be talked about on like higher leadership levels. And so as someone who was a direct service worker, when I would go to these county commission meetings or go to these city council meetings and they speak so arbitrarily of these systems like CMH or, you know, YPD or like police departments, like I get left frustrated because I feel like there's this disillusionment between the administrators of these different programs and then also the people who are working directly within those programs. And those often don't match. And so I wanted to bring attention to that. I wanted to bring awareness to those discrepancies and like what's being reported, you know, positively versus what's actually happening on a ground level, to change the conversation, to go more progressive and left. But unfortunately, I'm also witnessing like a lot of the like collateral consequences that come with that whenever you challenge a very well-known and established elected official.
Yep.
And so like the things that come of that when you do disrupt the status quo a little bit, and the willingness people have to uphold
Right.
power within these systems because it's their power at risk.
Wow. So just unpacking that a little bit. What are some of the things that you started to see that we don't know? You know, if you could like expand on that as you was connecting the electoral and grassroots campaigns.
Yeah, so there's a lot of fear around sustaining programs, for example, like programs that are very needed, programs that are extremely important to have that are rooted in community. These programs, there's a genuine fear of loss of funding for these programs because of the fear that's around, like, well, if this person's not in office, like, what is to happen? And so there's that kind of impact of like very abolitionist-based organizations not being willing to choose to kind of dismantle some oppressive systems with the name of their mission in mind, because the compromise of risking sustainable funding is at risk. And so that's always like a daunting thing to kind of encompass or to overcome, But also like now very much active on like a city commission, like it's very it's become like very known of like a very observable to see like how different people are willing and the systems are willing to really maintain what they are now because change is really scary. And that's ultimately what I'm seeing is like this concept of change is we're scared to approach that.
Right. And let me just break it down even more and help me out here, Kat. I know we got some people in the studio here because I'm about to go in. Is this kind of like, would you translate this into like, for example, like we're trying to end cash bail, okay? But yeah, finger snap to that. But because some of our elected officials don't want to sign necessarily, but to put their name on it, what's the likelihood of that happening? See, that's what is that
It's
what you're kind of
risky, right? Like things that are viewed as risky,
I'm
right?
not going to be the lone wolf out on that.
Right, because it's like a social suicide essentially. Like you're sabotaging. That's what it's and that's rooted in white supremacy culture. Ultimately, is like this need to be very protective of the dominant culture because anything that could potentially poke holes in it or draw attention to it or change it or morph it is a risk, and that risk needs to be eliminated completely. And that is done through isolating people, that's done through scapegoating people, that's done through completely, ruining people's program. Like there's so many different ways that we see white supremacy culture being sustained. And so those are things that I've witnessed a little bit, just like from not even just me personally, but also like as a community-wide impact.
And yeah, talking to Kat, amazing community organizer, also the chair of Human Relations Commission in Ypsilanti. One thing that you said, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, Kat, but you use abolitionists, and I want people to fully understand what that means. I don't think, because when we think, let's just be real, when you think of that word, you think of something back during slavery time, but explain it in 2024. What is an abolitionist?
Oh,
I know that's a
is
mouthful.
that's a big one.
And
to
we
take
got
on
about
too.
6 minutes, so I know you can do it.
So 6-minute explanation. I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but for me, the thing that kind of drives me is equity minded and liberation of people who have been oppressed. And like for me, history is really important,
Right.
And the historical context, because I believe Ibram Kendi said that history is seldomly taught, which is always why it's repeated. So for me, abolition is not only like freeing people, not only like from the literal cages that exist, but also the metaphorical cages that exist around us.
Wow. Go ahead, Kat.
That's
Woo!
that's like the
spit some
healthcare
knowledge.
system, the education system. There's so many things that oppress people beyond prisons, and the cages are also metaphorical in that sense. And so that it's ridding those things. It's creating things instead that reduce the reliance on those things. It's rethinking those things, and it's not being afraid to have those conversations and view conflict as like something scary, because conflict is inevitable. Everyone has it. It's like how we get things done is by being able to hash it out and like understand perspectives. But when we're afraid of conflict, we ultimately are perpetuating the problem, which that we're saying we want to eradicate.
Wow. Kat did that doggone thing. You're going to make me cuss. I'm just kidding. Kat, so we got about 4 minutes left, Kat. Before we get out of here, please tell people how they can reach out to you, because one of the things our guests, if you don't want to give your personal information, you can definitely reach us at myliberation.org, y'all. If you want to reach out, we'll get in touch with any body that you see on the show. But Kat, if you have a website or any type of thing you want to give out, they can go to My Liberation and I can connect you that way. But
that's great. Personal connections I always love. I am on Instagram, and the Instagram that I think is the most relevant is one that I created to do like civic education and action for the city of Ypsi.
Yeah.
And that one is on Instagram. It's at YPSI.civic, CIV, like Victor IC.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Give it one more time, because some people, they have brain fog.
Yes, absolutely. So it's at Ypsi, YPSI.civic, CIVIC. I believe I spelled that right. Ypsi.civic on Instagram.
Wow. Kat, you understood the assignment. Now, here's the thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad. That's good, because I was a little bit.
You ain't scared.
Yeah.
You ain't scared.
Thank you.
You guys got to come back. We got to talk. We got people here in the studio. We got to go deeper in that harm reduction. But one thing I wanted, before we leave, we got about 3 minutes. What are you working on now? What's going on? We got this election coming up.
Yes.
But anyway, but what are you working on? You and your team and
Well, really, I'm really excited. I've been working on something related to fair chance housing in the city of Ypsi, and also really trying to reduce these barriers that are systemic in the city's policies and charter and ordinances for people who are formerly incarcerated or have conviction histories. That's really what a lot of my attention has been going to, is like trying to change those policies in the city. And one of them is the fair chance housing that we're working on right now.
that's what's up.
Which
yeah.
doesn't ban background checks. It reverses or changes the order of the application process so people have the opportunity to meet applicants and provide a conditional offer that then should the housing provider want to do a background check, they're allowed to, but if they find something on that background check, they have to write a reason for refusing to provide housing to that person they just gave a conditional offer to. And it's an accountability process, ultimately, to make sure people are having something to see if they're being denied housing. But it's also an opportunity for people to build a relationship before there's a door shut in their face because they have a conviction history. But that's all in draft form, and we're working on it right now. So that's my biggest project.
What's the name of that again? We've got to write that down.
The Fair Chance Housing. We worked with Nation Outside, actually. They were really helpful with us. Jessica Henry has been really great with us, and they helped pass it in this Jackson City and also Kalamazoo.
All right, so that's what you're working on. All right, thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh man, this was, we're just scratching the surface. You know that.
Yes, it's an iceberg.
Yeah, it's so much because one of the things when you come back, I'm already putting that out in the atmosphere.
Oh, okay.
You, Corn,
Manifestation.
we got to unpack some of this stuff. There's so many other topics that like, harm reduction, the mental health situation. I know.
Crisis response.
Because don't you guys have the non-police?
We're working on it.
See what I'm
There's
saying?
a lot. It's a pilot, I believe, and there's a lot of things still being, but there's a lot of pushback from the city council and mayor on that. And that's what's interesting is a lot of the conversation in 2022 and 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, Black Lives Matter, defund the police. And now we see a very big shift in that where it's not really defund the police, but let's partner with the police, with mental health professionals. And we also know that that's not effective. There's a lot of interesting things happening right now, but we can get into that next time.
Next time, y'all. Well, Kat, before we go out, you got to do it. Everybody in the studio got to do this. Respect the roots. So what you going to do?
Respect the roots.
One more time.
Respect the roots.
All right, y'all. Till next time, remember to respect the roots. And thank you, Kat. You coming back. It's a wrap. Till next time, y'all.
Marjon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, y'all. Till next time. Michigan Liberation Education Fund, C3, conducts grassroots organizing, leadership development, and civic engagement activities. Michigan Liberation C4 and Michigan Liberation Action Fund, IE, are sister organizations.